In this video, I want to give you an overview of why strength and conditioning is important for athletes. Recently had a conversation with a client, and the main purpose of that conversation was trying to understand how S&C can really help. I think the main problem I'm going to talk about in just a second is that sometimes it's not clear where S&C fits in, and there's often a kind of, at least in the minds of athletes, a difference between what you're doing in your strength and conditioning program and what your sport looks like. And sometimes it's unclear where that link exists and therefore what the benefit of strength and conditioning actually is. So in this video, I want to kind of give you an overview of exactly what that link is, how it ties in, the real benefits and the problems that S&C solves for athletes trying to compete at a high level. So the main problem, as I've said, there's a disconnect in the mind of athletes between their sport and their S&C program. Firstly, strength and conditioning is not the same as sport, so they're not trying to be the same thing. It's trying to be a supplementary training program to support performance and aid performance potential. But for athletes, sometimes it's not clear what the link is. So in other words, why a certain exercise helps them to become better, or why it's going to help them to perform more effectively on the field or on the court, whatever sport they're playing. And this is why I wanted to kind of address that in this video today. So fundamentally, there's a little bit of a disconnect there between what S&C looks like and how it impacts their performance, and why you're doing certain exercises, how that's going to help you become a better athlete overall. So that's what I wanted to address in this sort of short video for you guys. So the solutions that S&C provides in regards to that problem in terms of sports performance is three kind of key areas, and those are availability, performance, and position on the field. So I'm just going to go through those three things and hopefully give you an insight into how S&C really helps to contribute to these three areas. So the first one is that strength and conditioning helps to reduce the risk of injury. In other words, allows you to do more of what you love, which is your sport. Fundamentally, you want to be able to do as much of your sport as you can, more of the time. And if you're able to do that because of a training program that enables you to be fit, robust, physically capable of tolerating high volumes of the sport, you're going to be in the best position to actually technically, tactically develop. And in certain sports that are going to require a lot of training hours, hockey is obviously a key one because that's the kind of the main area that I work in, but I also work with gymnasts, swimmers, archers, runners as well. All of those sports require a lot of time. You know, there's no getting around it. If you want to get really, really good at your sport, you've got to put in a lot of hours to develop the technical and tactical understanding of that sport and become a master of your sport. Now, in order to be able to tolerate that amount of volume, you have to be physically capable of doing so. And ideally, just playing the sport would give you all the physical tools necessary to become excellent in your sport. But unfortunately, that just isn't the case. And there are things you need to do physically to provide an overload to your body in order for it to become stronger and more tolerant of high volumes of training. And that is the first problem that strength and conditioning solves. It enables you to be more resilient, more robust. You can do more training and get better at your sport without breaking down when the volume suddenly kicks up a notch. And at every level of sport, there's going to be a step in performance, a noticeable step. And you've probably experienced it yourself before. If you go from one step, say in like a youth sort of level or a kind of sub-elite level, and then you step up to a high level of performance, the speed of the game is faster, the volume of training is higher, the physical stress on your body are bigger, the amount of recovery time it's going to take is going to be longer. And so if you've got the physical tools to be able to do that and tolerate that, you're going to be in a better position to be able to kick on and become better. And if you break down because you haven't got those physical tools, clearly that's not good, and you want to be able to tolerate that as much as possible. A few things to highlight this. There was some research done around hamstring injuries. A number of you will be familiar with the hamstring bridge test because it's a test I like to use to kind of gauge injury risk at the hamstring. Freckleton et al. Found that those who had existing hamstring injuries were more likely to score poorly in the hamstring bridge test. So there's one example for you. An injury, a highly common injury in lots of running-based sports like a hamstring injury. The S&C program is designed to kind of, step one, assess what that hamstring is capable of physically, and then provide the physical training for it to become stronger, more robust, and tolerate more volume. So when you come to doing more work through the hamstring, it's less likely to break down. Okay, and in this research, that's what they found, that athletes who had a higher score in the hamstring bridge test were less likely to get injured. And if you're less likely to get injured, you can do more of your sport. And if you can do more of your sport, you can put in more hours and become better technically. So that's really, really key. Second one, strengthening the muscles of the trunk reduces shear force. In other words, at the spine, which is put under lots of stresses in all sorts of different sports, and particularly hockey again. So the lumbar muscles are going to do a lot of work to have to kind of overcome all of those stresses and strains that's being placed on it. If we can strengthen through the core and the trunk muscles, we reduce that shear stress that's put on the lumbar spine and reduce the need for lumbar muscle work. In other words, again, we're reducing the risk of injury through physical training, which means that you can tolerate more of your sport and the stresses that the sport places on you, and you're in a better position to be able to do more training hours without breaking down. So another example there to highlight that. The second problem is around performance, and strength and conditioning is going to help you to improve physically by increasing your physical outputs. So not only does it mean you're more available and able to tolerate more, it also means you can be a physically better athlete as well by increasing the outputs you're able to produce. The squat, for example, has been found to improve athletic performance in young athletes, and research demonstrates an impact on your sprint speed and the most amount of power that you can put out. So if you think about any sporting action, it normally happens in short bursts, like a short sprint or a change of direction or a jump or a quick action. And this is where the S&C program here, for example, if you're going to get stronger in a movement like a squat, that's what's going to help you to improve your sprint speed and your peak power output. So in other words, becoming a more robust and powerful athlete overall. Specifically in relation to hockey players now, it's also been shown to increase agility, strength and endurance in male hockey players. And so there's a direct impact on performance in hockey players through strength training, which is really exciting. In other words, not only are we able to just physically be more tolerant to all the stresses that the sport places on us, we can also improve the performance as well, which is really good. So in this study, they looked at male hockey players, and so all the different physical attributes you can think of are improved, things which are really key to the sport, like agility, being able to change direction really quick, strength and endurance performance, which again comes into the amount of volume that is typically kind of experienced in the sport. Strength training helped to improve these three key areas. And this has been found time and time again in lots of different sports, that not only are you able to reduce the risk of injury, but you're also able to increase your physical performance potential. And that's ultimately what S&C is trying to do. It's trying to raise the ceiling of your physical outputs in order that you can tolerate more work and perform better overall. And then the third bit is around the kind of positions that you're going to find yourself getting into in the sport. So two sort of contrasting sports here. You've got archery and hockey. On the left-hand side with hockey, you very typically find yourself in this unilateral split stance position, like on the Dutch athlete on the left there. And as you can see in a kind of exercise like a split squat, which is, for me, a really kind of key exercise for hockey players, you're going to find yourself in similar positions to the sport. So you're actually going to get stronger in positions that you're technically finding yourself in, which is really good. Again, sports where you're doing loads and loads of volume like these two, if those joints are being put into positions like this over and over and over and over again, the stronger we can get those joints in these key positions, the more able you are to tolerate high volumes of training. So on the left-hand side here, if you can get stronger in a split squat, all the muscles that stabilize around the hip and the ankle and through the core, in those kind of positions, are going to be strengthened so you can express more force and tolerate more training. So when you go onto the field, you're able to tolerate more training volume, and actually it should feel significantly easier when you're having to deal with less force in an unloaded bodyweight position like this now. So when you're performing an action like a slap hit, shot, drag flick, something like that, and you're used to X amount of load being put through the system in these kind of positions, then you go to a high velocity, lower force movement, it's going to feel a little easier, and the joints are going to be really strong in those key positions, as well as the tissues involved, like in this position here on the left, the adductors and the groin, the hamstrings, the muscles around the trunk that stabilize the spine. All of those key muscles are going to be doing lots and lots of work and improving their tolerance to load. And on the right hand side here, in like an upper body based sport like archery, again, you're going to get into these kind of quite significant externally rotated shoulder positions, and that's where things like face pulls on the right hand side there, external rotation movements, which are going to increase the strength of the muscles of the rotator cuff that stabilize the scapula, again, are really key because it's going to enable you to be strong and effective in positions that you repeatedly find yourself in. So going back to the previous point, you're able to be more available more of the time because you can tolerate higher volumes of training. And in a highly technical sport like archery, the more hours that you can put in, the better. And if you're limited in the amount of hours you can put in because you're physically not capable of tolerating hours and hours of training, there's no way you're going to be able to reach certain levels because you haven't had the time to put into it. So the time component is so key. So you're buying back time in the future by putting the work in now. That's kind of the key sort of take home from that. So in a sort of summary of the short overview of how these things interplay and where the links of S&C and sports performance come in. Number one, S&C is not the same as sport. So when you see something and you're not really sure about why you're doing it, that's okay. It doesn't need to be the same as a sport to have an impact on it, if that makes sense. Number two, it gives you the physical potential to excel in your sport. So it's not about directly improving it instantly. It's about giving you in the long term the potential to improve and excel in the future in your sport. And the reasons for this are multifaceted, but in summary, it gives you greater physical output and a higher amount of robustness. You can tolerate more training, put more hours in, and become better. And then finally, it keeps you available for more of the season and contributes to better performance because, again, if you're more tolerant of high volumes of training, you can do more, practice more, get better, and increase your performance, which ultimately is the biggest predictor of success in the long term. So I hope that's been really helpful. Just kind of join a few dots in your mind, hopefully, between what the S&C looks like, what the sports performance looks like, why your program looks like it does. And I hope this is sort of summarised and answered a few questions that you might have had. So I hope that's been useful.